Ever since the very first Best Picture Oscar went to a movie called Wings, a First World War drama about two fighter pilots, the Academy has shown plenty of love to films that use war as a backdrop to tell us stories about history, heroes, and humanity. Films like War Horse, the story of a young man and his loyal steed.
What's your name, lad?
Albert, sir.
And how old are you,
19,
Albert?
sir.
Is that the truth?
No, sir, but I look 19 and I'm bigger than most 19-year-olds and I'm strong, sir.
But before Steven Spielberg made the story into an Oscar contender, it was a London stage play. And before that, a relatively unknown book written by Michael Morpurgo, a Brit with a very personal and surprising connection to Canada. More on that later. Now, in the late 70s, Michael founded Farms for City Children, a charity that gives inner-city kids the chance to discover nature and themselves in the English countryside.
Children can't learn everything in school, particularly those children who have very little, go very few places, and don't get the opportunities that some other children get.
But mostly Michael writes books, more than 100 of them, including War Horse. Like most of his books, critically acclaimed, but didn't sell a lot of copies. But for Michael, it's never really been about making the bestsellers list. See, he started out as a grade school teacher, but when he realized most of his students' books were, well, not that great, he started to write them himself. His goal, to teach kids the value of love and loyalty and the futility of war. Everybody, please welcome Michael Morpurgo. Great to see you.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Congratulations on this. I mean, it's incredible if you think about it, though. A book that was written, I think you've even described it as a non-event when it came out 30 years ago.
Yeah, it was a major disappointment. It came out in 1982. And I thought it's the best book I've ever written. My wife thought it was the best book ever, and she's always right. She has very good taste, my wife, in books and men.
You say men plural.
I never thought of that before. I'm worried now. No, it came out, and it was a disappointment because I thought I'd done all right. And then what happened to the book was it went on to my backlist. It's fine. I kept it in print. The publishers, bless their hearts, kept it in print, and then it just sort of sold 1,000 copies, 2,000 copies a year, and went to sleep. And then the National Theatre comes along and they want to make a play of my book using puppets. And this is a story about the First World War. And I'm thinking, what are you on about?
The perspective from a horse?
Exactly. And I'm thinking, pantomime horses, this isn't going to work, it's silly. But then I saw a video, which they showed me, of the work of handspring puppets. And they showed me just a little black and white video of a giraffe walking across the studio floor. And it took your breath away, it was so beautiful. That you saw three people simply becoming giraffe, breathing, living creature. It was so moving, and I suddenly thought, well, hang on, we're onto something now, this could be wonderful. And it's true, these are the people, along with the genius people from the National Theatre who've brought the book to life, and now it sells a copy or two more.
Yeah, quite a bit. And then Spielberg makes a movie about it.
The man's, you know, one of the great storytellers of our age. This man can tell E.T. and he can tell Schindler's List. If you can do those two things, you can do War Horse, and he's done an extraordinary, epic job.
I love how you got this story, though. Like, just so...
Well, I was... You know, you get lucky in life, and I got lucky with this story. I happened to be living in a remote little community in the southwest of England, in Devon, a little village called Iddesleigh. And there were 3 old men living in that village in 1975, 2 of whom had been to the First World War, and the other had been alive at the time. And I just got talking to one of them in a pub, a man called Will Fellis. He'd been in the infantry, gone to the war age 17. He'd been gassed. He'd been wounded. He'd had his life spared by a German. All sorts of extraordinary stories he told me. And I was so touched by that. Went to talk to another old man in the village who'd been with horses to the war, and he told me more about how he confided his deepest fears and his joys and great sorrows of losing friends to his horse while he fed the horse. And I was so touched by that, and I determined I would write the story about one of these horses.
War is a big part of your story.
Yes, very much so. I mean,
you've got a book about a dog in Afghanistan.
Yes, Shadow. Right? Yes.
Depending on how you count it, there's upwards of 40 conflicts going on around the world, significant conflicts. Yeah. What does this teach us about war, your approach to it?
Well, all I know is that I'm a war baby. I grew up after the Second World War, and I lived in London, and I saw the result of war all around me. Yeah. I thought it was just buildings, first of all. We used to play in the bomb sites in the best playgrounds you could possibly invent. Wonderful. And then I suppose, 5 or 6, I began to realize that something had gone on. They called this war. My family would talk about it. And there was a photograph on the mantelpiece in our sitting room. And it was of my Uncle Peter, who had been shot down in the RAF in 1941, I think, aged 21. I didn't know him, but I could see that my mother was deeply wounded all her life. Every time his name was mentioned, it was his birthday, it was Remembrance Day, she simply couldn't cope. And then I realized that actually war doesn't just kill people and knock down buildings, it destroys those who live on afterwards, because she never really recovered. She went on grieving for her brother for the rest of her life. So now when I see on my television a bomb hitting some bridge in Iraq or Afghanistan and some lorry simply going up in smoke, I don't think, clever, clever. I think that person in that lorry had a mother, had a father, has a son, has a daughter, and they didn't mean to fight this war. Why do we go on doing this stuff? It just makes me so sad that we don't get that this is not the way to solve our problems.
You must have a really unique perspective then on the riots that happened there. You know, a lot of times around the world it was painted as just troublemakers, but there was way more going on behind the scenes.
We have a society which is very clearly divided between those who are connected to it and feel they have some sense of belonging, and those who are alienated. And there are many, many of those who are alienated. And that is our fault. It's not their fault that they're alienated. How they behave may be their fault. I'm not condoning breaking windows and rioting, but I am saying there's good reasons for it. And what we have to do is engage those people when they're young, make them feel that they've got a contribution to make to this world. If we do that, we can do something about the difficulty. But these are not problem children. These are wonderful kids.
It's so hard, man. I mean, you've experienced it. A lot of people experience it, especially when you're growing up and you're not raised, your father's not in the picture. That it takes a village to help out, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. A whole community.
Let's play a clip. Just when you see this, it's from Great Expectations on CBC.
Hold your tongue. I keep still, I'll set yourself. Now, what's your name?
Spitzer.
Once more. Give him out.
Spitzer.
Now, where do you live?
What do you think when you see that?
No one told me you were going to show me that. That was my daddy. He was Magwitch. That's the first time I ever saw my father. Why didn't anyone tell me about that? I'm a man of 68. I could have died of a heart attack. You wouldn't have cared. You'd have had a show, you know?
No, we absolutely cared.
Oh, wow.
Because I think what you've accomplished in your life and as a teacher and the amount of work you put in, your relationship with, that piece, lots of kids go through stuff like that and don't know how to find their way through it. You did.
Do you know the story of how I first saw him?
Well, I think that's the first time you saw your father, right?
That's the first time I ever saw my father. He left and came to Canada when I was about 2, and I never saw him. And we were sitting around the television, whatever it was, when I was 19 years old. And in those days, no one ever talked about divorce, and no one ever spoke about my father in the house. I had a stepfather, and it was all covered up. And my mother was sitting there, and we were sitting there watching CBC's Great Expectations, and that happened. And she goes, "Michael, that's your father."
I mean, come on.
My father's a convict? And the next time I see him, because my brother then went out, we did lots and lots of research, and we found another production that he was in where he was a polar bear. Dressed up as a polar bear. So I got a father who's first of all a convict, and then he's a
polar bear.
I can't believe that's just happened. That's wonderful. Thank you for that.
No, of course, man. Thank you for... But wait a second. Michael, that's your father. What happens to you in that second? Like that, you hear those words. What happened?
Well, quite a lot of anger, I suppose. We never talked about it. And I still feel that a bit. I don't blame my mother. These things happen in grown-up lives. I know that. But it was, you miss him retrospectively. And I have a great respect for him, actually, because he did, I think, the right thing. And it sounds strange now, and people won't agree with it. But at a certain moment in his life, he'd been away at the war. And when he came back from the war, from Baghdad, funnily enough, which is where he was, he discovered that my mother had gone off with someone else. And he didn't know his 2 children, my brother Peter and myself. We were virtually unknown to him because he'd been away so much. And so it was his decision to say, look, if this is what you must do to my mother, then do it. But I don't want to be the father that comes visiting on weekends. They don't know me. Why would I visit? I'm not their... They don't think I'm their father. What's the point of it? So he simply absented himself and came over to Canada.
As if it was a sacrifice in a way.
It was. I think what he was concerned about, and I really respect this, is that a child should feel they've got a father and a mother, if possible, that love them, and to kind of intrude because he needed it, he didn't feel was right. I know that's not a very modern view, but I'm always grateful to him for it, because he said to my mother, please give him my name. So my name is Michael Andrew Bridge, Morpurgo, and I will come and see them if they want me to come and see them when they're older. And that's exactly what happened.
Warhorse is not just going to be a film, but obviously there's a stage production as well. It's in Toronto in February. The film is in theaters right now. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for coming.
It's been a pleasure.
No pleasure. We'll be right back.